I had paid $80,000 for a wedding I was banned from attending. I was standing in the hallway of my childhood home, holding the venue receipt in my shaking hands, when my own sister walked past me, looked me up and down, and said 7 words I will never forget. "You are too broken to be seen." She said it the way you'd tell someone their shirt is wrinkled, casual, unbothered, like my grief was an inconvenience she had simply decided to stop accommodating. My husband had been dead for 6 weeks, my son was 4 months old, and my sister was wearing a $12,000 dress that I had paid for, standing on floors that I owned. She had forgotten one thing: you should never insult the landlord. My name is Serena Calloway, and for 30 years, I was the invisible engine of my family. While my younger sister Jade collected compliments, I collected responsibilities. I built my career in luxury event management from nothing, became one of the most respected venue operators in Savannah, and quietly, without ever asking for recognition, became the financial backbone of every person who shared my last name. When my father's business started sliding 4 years ago, who covered the shortfall? Me. When my mother needed medical treatment her insurance denied, who paid out of pocket without hesitation? Me. And Jade, beautiful, effortless Jade, accepted every sacrifice I made as if it were simply her birthright. Then I met Daniel. Daniel was a structural engineer with kind eyes and terrible taste in movies. And he was the first person who ever looked at me and said, "You give too much to people who give you nothing back." We got married on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, 12 people, a small garden, the happiest day of my life. For 3 years, Daniel and I built something real, something solid, something that was entirely ours. Then, one morning, on a road I had driven 100 times, a truck ran a red light, and I lost everything in 4 seconds. My family did not offer a hug. They offered a bill. When Jade announced her engagement 2 months after Daniel's funeral, my mother pulled me aside and told me it was my moral obligation to fund the wedding, to save the family's honor, to give Jade the celebration she deserved. And because I was still broken and still desperate for their love, I said yes. I paid for the $12,000 dress, the floral arrangements, the photographer, the catering deposit, and the $80,000 venue, a beautiful historic estate called Magnolia Grand, which, as it turned out, I had quietly purchased with Daniel's life insurance 18 months earlier. He had insisted on it. "Something solid," he said, "something that will take care of you when I can't." My family never knew. Why would they? They had never paid attention to anything I built. The week before the wedding, Jade stopped pretending to be grateful entirely. Every time I mentioned Daniel, she would cut me off. "You're making this about you again, Serena. This is my week." Every suggestion I made about the venue setup was rejected, not because it was wrong, but because she wanted to remind me that I was staff, not family. Then came the night that changed everything. It was the evening before the ceremony. I was sitting in my childhood bedroom doing remote work, trying to rebuild the savings I had drained for her wedding, when the door opened, without a knock. Jade walked in, followed by my mother, followed by my father, Arthur. All 3 of them, standing in my doorway, looking at me the way you look at something that needs to be removed. "Serena," my father said, his voice completely flat, "you are not coming to the wedding tomorrow." I looked up from my laptop. "What?" "We told Marcus's family you're a distant cousin who couldn't make it," my mother said. Smoothing her jacket like this was a minor scheduling adjustment. "Your presence would raise questions we don't want to answer." Jade stepped forward, and what she said next, I will carry with me for the rest of my life. "Look at you. You're a miserable widow in black clothes with a baby who never stops crying. Your sad energy is going to make everyone uncomfortable. Marcus's family is old money, Serena. They don't want to sit next to grief at a wedding reception. You would embarrass us." I sat completely still. "You want me to stay in this room?" "We want you to stay invisible," my mother said, "like you're good at." They turned and left. I sat there for a long time, not moving, just listening to the sound of my own breathing. Then I noticed my handbag was missing from the chair where I had left it. I stepped quietly into the hallway, and through the gap in the kitchen door, I saw something that turned my grief into something else entirely. Jade was holding Daniel's watch, the antique Rolex he had worn every day of our marriage, the one I had been saving for our son, the one they had taken from my bag while I sat in that room believing they had simply forgotten I existed. "She won't even notice," Jade was saying, turning it over in her hands. "She's too busy crying to keep track of anything. This covers our first-class upgrade to Maui." My mother laughed softly. "It's the least she can contribute, after everything we've done for her." I stepped back into the shadows of that hallway, and something inside me went completely quiet. Not the quiet of grief, the quiet of someone who has just realized they have been holding the winning hand the entire time. I went back to my room, closed the door, and did not make a single sound. While my family spent the morning of the wedding celebrating downstairs, I opened my laptop, and I made 4 phone calls. The first was to Claire, my venue operations manager, the woman who had worked alongside me since the day Daniel and I first unlocked the doors of Magnolia Grand. "Claire," I said quietly, "pull every contract associated with the Harrington wedding booking. I need our full legal standing on a breach of conduct cancellation, and I need it within the hour." Claire called back in 40 minutes. Because Jade's booking had been made through a third-party coordinator who had failed to disclose a direct family relationship with the venue owner, we had complete legal authority to void the entire agreement and revoke all vendor sponsorships. Every caterer, every florist, every lighting crew, every piece of that wedding was mine to cancel or keep at my sole discretion. I sat with that for exactly 3 minutes. Then I made my second call to the off-duty police officers I had personally contracted for venue security that evening. I informed them there had been a theft of personal property on the premises and provided them with a full description and the police report I had filed that morning for Daniel's watch. My third call was to a journalist at the Savannah Chronicle who had been requesting an exclusive feature on Magnolia Grand for 2 years. I told her I had something better than a feature. I had a story. My fourth call was to Claire again. "The green dress," I said. "The one I wore to the venue opening. Have it pressed and ready. I'll be there at 7. I walked downstairs at 6:45, in my deep green gown, Daniel's watch back on my wrist where it belonged, the original deed to Magnolia Grand and the theft report folded in my clutch. My mother was standing in the foyer. She looked at me with pure shock. "Where do you think you're going?" I smiled at her, for the first time in 6 weeks. "To my venue," I said. "I have a prior engagement." The grand ballroom was everything I had designed it to be. 200 guests in black tie, candlelight, white roses everywhere. The string quartet playing softly in the corner. Jade was radiant. I will not pretend otherwise. She stood near the head table in that $12,000 dress, looking like everything she had always believed herself to be. My father stood at the golden microphone after dinner, champagne glass raised, beginning his toast about family legacy and generational strength. I was standing at the back of the room, next to Claire. "Now," I said quietly. The string quartet shifted into a new piece, Daniel's favorite, a song he used to hum on Sunday mornings, that nobody in that room had ever heard, except me. And then the main screen behind the reception table came to life. But it did not show the wedding slideshow. It showed the recording from my childhood home kitchen, Jade's voice crystal clear through the ballroom speakers. "She won't even notice. She's too busy crying." Then my mother's voice. "It's the least she can contribute." The room went absolutely silent. 200 people turned away from the screen and found me, standing at the back of the room, in green, with Daniel's watch on my wrist. I walked down the center aisle slowly, and I stepped onto the stage. I took the microphone from my father's trembling hand. "This evening has been paid for, planned by, and is legally owned by me," I said, my voice carrying across every corner of that silent room. "And as the sole owner of Magnolia Grand, I am terminating this event, effective immediately, for breach of contract and theft of personal property." My father grabbed my arm. "You are a traitor." But my hand was already raised. The security team moved in. The officers placed my father's arms behind his back and clicked handcuffs around his wrists, in front of every guest in that room. A second officer approached Jade and removed Daniel's watch from her clutch. She screamed, a long, horrified sound that echoed through the entire ballroom. Marcus's father stood up from the VIP table, looked at my family, and said 4 words in a voice made entirely of disgust. "The merger is finished." He walked out, taking his entire network with him. The Callaway name, built on my silence and my money, collapsed in 11 minutes. My father and Jade faced criminal charges for theft and fraud. The legal process was long, and it was very public. My mother, cut off from the income she had taken for granted for 30 years, quietly relocated. No forwarding address, no goodbye. As for me, I am standing on the balcony of my home this evening, my son asleep inside, the Savannah skyline going gold in the last of the light. The $80,000 I spent on that wedding was the best money I ever lost, because it bought me something I hadn't had in 30 years: clarity. Daniel used to say that real family shows up in the dark, in the quiet, in the moments when you have nothing left to offer them. He was right. They never showed up once. The invisible engine has finally been uncoupled, and for the first time in my life, I am running entirely on my own power. Jade stood at that altar, believing she had built something perfect. What she had actually built was a stage for her own collapse. Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me in the comments. Do you think I was too calculated, too cold, for ending my sister's wedding the way I did? Or did they get exactly what they deserved for trying to steal a widow's legacy? Drop your answer in the comments right now. I read every single one personally. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button. It helps this channel reach people who need to hear these stories. Subscribe, because our next story is already waiting. A woman discovers her husband has been funding his mistress using her own business accounts and finds out when the mistress calls her during labor. The quietest woman in the room is always the most dangerous one.